Hey y'all, it's Tiana, and I'm excited to be bringing you another conversation with a guest for the Live Your Best Fat Life podcast. This one is a good one. It's a continuation of a conversation that we started back in the Braving Body Shame conference in 2021. I enjoyed it, and I really hope that you do too. So, get ready. Here we go. Hey, everybody, it's Tiana, and I have a guest today. Hey, guest.
Hello, hello.
So, this guest is somebody that I just sort of like found on social media, and I had no idea who you were. I didn't know what you were doing. I just thought, like, oh, this post is great. I don't even remember what post it was. And I was like, I'm going to follow this because this is great. And then I had the pleasure of interviewing you for the Braving Body Shame 2020 conference, or the 2021 conference. And the conversation was fire.
Yeah, I we really had good chemistry, right?
Oh,
Like I'm
heck
not
yeah.
gonna lie, that I thought that was a really great conversation, and it was an honor to be asked to be able to share my story and my braving body shame story.
Oh, heck yeah. That was so good. I just remember like having the conversation and going like, ooh, this is deep. I'm learning something. We're going places I didn't think we were going to go. And I was like, this is good money. We need to do this again. And so here we are doing this
Yeah,
again.
yeah, I am so glad that you reached out. I know, the space, when I talk about this space, the body liberation space, can feel small but vast at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because it seems like there are a fair number of people doing this work, but it's so amazing to be able to find the few that you really authentically connect with,
Yeah.
and share a lot of lived experiences in different ways. So I was so pumped when you reached out and asked for B to come on, and we can just continue the party, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, this is so good. I'm excited. I'm like so I have goosebumps and I'm so excited. So like nobody knows who you are yet. So my lovely guest, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sure, absolutely. So hello, everybody. My name is Patrilie Hernandez, and my pronouns are she, her, they, and them. So I, have been working in health and nutrition. I've worked as an educator. I've worked as an advocate, a project manager, a policy analyst. I have, kind of an eclectic academic background. I have a degree in culinary arts, I have a degree in anthropology, I have a degree in nutrition, nonprofit management. And so people are always like, oh my gosh, that's kind of all over the place. But if you uh, hear my story, right, and my lived experiences, I identify as a fat, neuroatypical, queer femme of the Puerto Rican diaspora. You'll see that a lot of my lived experiences and my life journey really informed my next steps, where I was going to go with my academic um, pursuits and my career. So basically, what I'm here to do, and I'm here to disrupt the status quo of my local nutrition and wellness community. And I advocate for white inclusive health paradigms in educational and in healthcare settings. So, what do I do currently? I currently work here in Washington, D.C. I live and work in Washington, D.C., USA. I work in early childhood health and nutrition, and I help others nurture young children who are confident in their relationship with food, their health, and their bodies. In addition to that, I'm the founder of Embody Live, and that's a community, a platform that helps people of the global majority reclaim their health and well-being. And what do I like to do in my spare time? I'm pretty simple. I love cooking for others. I love looking at the moon, and I love spending time with my partner and my Chihuahua Sophie.
I love it. I love it. Like there have been As you were introducing yourself, there's like so many points where I'm just like grinning ear to ear, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Um, and also just like ideas firing off in my head because you told me some things in there that I did not know about you. You
Oh,
culinary
awesome.
arts, what?
Yeah, yeah. I started off my career in the kitchen. I went to college for 2 years after high school, and it was just a hot mess. And I needed to
Mm,
find myself. And I found myself in a kitchen of a catering company at an art museum that kind of launched my interest, that reignited, because I've always loved to cook, but
yeah,
reignited and made um, actually getting paid to cook and work in the restaurant industry an option. So that's what I did for the first 5 years of my career.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I love that this is just another point of connection for us because I also went, to college straight out of high school and I made it 4 years somehow,
Mhm.
but I had a 2 year break because I also was completely lost. Like, I mean, I had a lot of things that had happened emotionally and mentally, and like, I was just like, I am lost. I'm completely lost. So I ended up taking a 2 year break. I call it my
Mhm.
sabbatical. but
at,
basically,
at the
yeah,
ripe age
yeah.
of 22 and 24.
Exactly. I'm just gonna go take a break and like see the world. And that's the thing, right? It's like generally, if you were white, and affluent, this would be, I'm gonna take a break and backpack around Europe. I didn't take a break to backpack around Europe. I ended up living at my mom's house and working customer service, which I was damn good at. But basically, like, very different experience.
Yeah. So I was very much a non-traditional student. I did end up going back to school, obviously, in my late 20s. And I did take out a loan to spend a semester abroad and backpack through Europe. I'm
Oh,
still paying for it today. But no regrets, no regrets.
no.
Um, but yeah, I think the break that I took, was partially not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, but it was also a mental health thing. I
Yeah.
was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 19.
Mm,
So I mean, a lot of that, it typically takes about 5 years to really get a hold on treatment. So they were tumultuous and it was chaotic at
yeah.
times and a lot of low points, but I managed to work as much as I could through that. And I didn't give up on my dream to finally go back to school, and I did. I was 27 when I graduated with my undergrad, and then
Yeah.
I went to grad school not soon after. So I mean, it's possible. I
Yeah.
think in American culture, a lot of people, or I wouldn't just say white American culture, but especially people that have had the immigration experience to the U.S. Right, the expectation is you go to college.
Mhm.
For a lot of us anyway, the ones that have more of an education and class privilege, which I do because both of my parents were both highly educated.
Mhm.
The expectation was for you to go to college and get the best job you could
Yeah.
at a young age, so you wouldn't have to financially suffer like your parents and your family did. So I
That's
see that
right.
kind of sentiment, and when that didn't happen for me, um, there's a there's a lot of guilt associated with that because it's like, oh,
Mm.
my parents came here to give me a better life, and like here I am. But it all works out. I would not change a thing about it. I would not go back, do anything differently, because if I did, it wouldn't lead me here to this moment with you,
That's
Diana.
right. That's
So
right. Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness. There's so much there. There's so much there. And I'm just like, I feel so much of that because, it was also my mom's dream that I went to college, and when like it didn't happen the way she wanted it to, there was disappointment, I think, on both sides. Now, she's never expressed hers, but I know that part of my guilt and my disappointment in myself was also coming from what I, like projected that my
mhm.
mom, or like imagined what my mom was thinking about what I was doing. And I also was able to go back and finish and I got out at 26. So I
There
got
you
you
go.
by 1 year, but but basically, it was it was really tough. I mean, but at the same time, like going back at that older age, I mean, I had only gone 2 years, but I knew what I was doing at that point. Like I
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
here
Same.
for. Yeah.
Same. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I was working, right? So you had
Yeah.
to manage working with being a student, and
Yeah.
you didn't have that college student experience that you see in the movies and stuff. But like I said, when I went back, I knew what I had to do, and I was in an emotional, I I had enough emotional maturity to
Yeah.
know what was on the line, right? You
Yeah.
finish this, and as a result, you can do this and this and this. So it
That's
allowed me to
right.
take it a lot more seriously.
That's right. And I think it's unfair, right? Like culturally at 18
Yeah.
to ask an 18-year-old to like choose the path of the rest of their lives, like
Mhm.
um there's a problem there.
Yeah. And I hear so many, kids, anyone under the age of 30 is kids.
Right?
But so many of these kids, so many of the youths, have I thought that my generation had a huge bout of imposter syndrome. I
Mm.
think our Gen Zers have it even worse because they're like 22 and 24, and they're like running around saying how unaccomplished they feel and how behind in
Mm.
life. And you're just like, you're 22, 24. Um, but I think that's just a product of the society we live in.
I agree.
Um,
I agree. Ooh, that reminds me of something
mhm.
that just like that I wrote down. I had to write it down.
Okay.
And I will share it not right now because I want to talk about the thing that made me think this. Um, you wrote this article
Mhm,
for Wear Your Voice magazine
mhm.
called Food Insecurity, Anti-Blackness, and Fat Phobia: What Food Access Advocates Need to Understand. And when I read this, I was like, yes, yes, very much yes, because we have to tie all these things together. When we're having this conversation, like in the mainstream, quote unquote, whatever that means to you or anyone listening, um, we talk about it in a certain kind of way, which is very stigmatizing. It's very othering, and it's really pejorative. And we're not talking about people, we're talking
Mhm.
about like avatars and like ideas. And this article that you wrote was so human and like just so real. And I want you to talk about it if you would like.
Yeah, yeah. So when Wear Your Voice first approached me to write an article or a set of articles for their Food is Political series, first of all, I completely I don't know what the word fan personed because this outlet has just been um so important
Yeah.
in my journey to critique dominant cultural systems and dominant power systems. So,
Mhm.
I remember meeting with the editor a few times because, I'm not a writer. Um, I I don't love it. I know I have other colleagues in this space that can just pump out, couple thousand word, you know, blogs and essays within the matter of hours. For me,
That's
I really
right.
have to sit with things. Um, and, I know that the editor was really interested in learning more about my career in food justice and the food access space and
Mhm.
what that meant. And so I know I mentioned when I introduced myself that my academic background is kind of a hodgepodge, but it really flows together if you
It
know my
does.
story. And so I didn't feel like I was able to share my thoughts on food access and food justice without sharing my personal story, because every move that I have made in my professional life, because I am one of those people where my profession and my passion overlap because of my drive and my innate purpose to do something in this world that makes the lives of others better, to help them thrive and to inspire them, right? To help others. So in order to share my thoughts on my experiences on the food access space over the past decade and a half, I really had to go to the place where it all started. And, I was on SNAP benefits for a couple of years. I was working the restaurant industry. I was trying to go to school part-time. I was trying to figure out my mental health. So I was juggling a lot of things. So I used, government assistance programs as a way to navigate my financial situation, my mental health, my career trajectory. So, and, I have experience with these programs. Growing up, my parents also utilized government assistance when they were starting out. So yeah, so I had to bring this perspective if I wanted people to truly understand where I was coming from and what that means for the work ahead. So yeah, so I just started off telling about, story I had waiting tables in St. Louis. And, my first, the first glimpse I got at chronic food insecurity outside of living in New York City when I was a youngster in the 80s. So that kind of that story that I told led to kind of me breaking down how food access and the work of food access and food justice kind of came into this space that really centers a lot of white supremacist ideas, especially around fat phobia and food policing. So, I started out kind of talking about the civil rights movement and what that has to do with hunger in America. So I, for a few years, I worked at this think tank that was really known as one of the best content experts around hunger and anti-hunger policy in the US. And I learned about, the history, I'm putting this in air quotes, about how hunger in America was first brought to light. But as I kind of tried to decolonize my approach around food access, I learned that they left a lot out. And a lot of that was the impact that, different sovereignty groups like the Black Panthers and different indigenous civil rights activists played in developing community feeding programs for children and adults. And so, just kind of looking at this as an introduction, like way back when they're like, oh, hunger in America was first brought to light because of Bobby Kennedy in this CBS documentary. And while, that was true to an extent, it brought hunger in America to white audiences.
That's right.
But it didn't necessarily, right? It was not a new issue within communities of color. And it was something that they had been working for decades through mutual aid models and through community care models to be able to address. So that was just one example that I brought up, right? Saying that a lot of what we know about hunger and food security in America has only been presented to us through a white lens. And what does it mean to pull that back and to really look at what the heart is of the issues and what has been done and what can be done if we listen more to Black and Indigenous leaders on this subject. So the other part of that was when I kind of weaved together how I don't know if I could say this word, obesity, the O word,
Yeah.
became intertwined into feeding hungry people. And that is a little bit more of a newer framework.
Yeah.
And again, right, it was something that was proposed by a white male doctor. That, there was a team of white men that really came together to coin what the obesity epidemic was. And then, it kind of took off from there. And from there, you saw, the inclusion or the change to BMI statuses that literally happened overnight, where people woke up in the morning and, 7 million people were now classified in a different BMI status, and therefore labeled as unhealthy because a group of medical experts decided to do that, right?
Oh my
there
gosh.
is, yeah, like there
I
is,
just, I'm sorry, I gotta jump in here. Oh my God. So I'm leading a group read right now, and we're reading Fearing the Black Body, The
awesome book.
Racial Origins of Fat Phobia, written by Dr. Sabrina Strings. And we just finished chapter 4. And it is so enraging to
Can it
find.
can you remind me which chapter that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, so we have read like where we're at right now is, so we have talked about the introduction, or like how the othering of Black people and Africans, or also Black Africans, they were referred to then as well, how they were like trying to distinguish between and justify enslaving these people
Yes, yes.
by essentially trying to say, like, here's how we are, and look at how civilized we are, because we are not like them. They're like gross and so savage, and look
Yeah.
at they're just gluttonous. And it's enraging, because then also they're talking about, she discusses in the book how like the introduction of sugar, which is is a a production courtesy of, the work of enslaved peoples and colonization, and how that impacted essentially the waistlines of, the colonizer countries. And then, we're talking about how also, like, in the book is in just, I'm stuttering because there's just like so much rage. And it's just like they're talking about how like beauty ideals were changed to better like differentiate between what is a quote unquote good white woman versus these lowly Black Africans. And the thing that is just enraging, just all of it is horrible. It's just horrible to
it's
read.
pretty atrocious.
It's really hard. But the thing that's very frustrating is the fact that it's just this handful of privileged white men who arbitrarily are making these determinations. What are they based on? Not much, except for this is what I personally happen to like, because I'm influenced by these other privileged white men who have made these arbitrary determinations. And it's so oh God, it's so frustrating.
And I mean, I do, like, I would love to talk about this, that this is all done right in the name of quote unquote science, race science. That is what you were, I think, inferring to when you were looking at the classification statuses in the book by Sabrina Strings to determine who was, of higher status, who was closer to God, who was pure, who was, more worthy. And that developed out of anthropologists that used a scientific framework to classify race, which is complete and utter bullshit. With the BMI classifications, we see something not necessarily paralleled, but if you look at the methodology of, for example, this status that was changed overnight that impacted tens of millions of people, it was a decision that was driven by profit, in a sense, because by lowering the BMI, the overweight category from 27, the normal, quote unquote, BMI status from 27 to 25, and anything above 25 was overweight. That was for insurance companies to be able to promote that number 25 as being easier to remember. This was not based on, longitudinal studies, double-blind controlled studies. This was due to appease a financial stakeholder. So when we look at the parallels of race science and how that's driven by capitalist profit, right? When the onset to justify chattel slavery. People can, Africans, to justify the enslavement of Africans to be able to work the land in order to develop a strong economy for the white settlers and the white colonizers. You see how science is weaponized in this sense. And so, I just think this is really relevant now, especially in this time as people are questioning science. But I think it's just interesting because the people that are questioning science and what it means are, again, the majority of them hold dominant identities, right? Especially here in the US, right? We're looking at the anti-vax movement, all of that. It is being primarily driven by those that have very systemically advantaged identities, whether it's class privilege, whether it's skin privilege. And so I just find that really interesting, just the parallels among the three and how science is really driven by a lot of the times those with the most capital, and those happen to be old white men most of the time.
Oh my God, yes. And it's so frustrating because that's also something, I mean, this book is talking, I think the beginning of the book is something like we're talking about the 1500s, and the part that we just finished reading, we're in the 1700s. And it's just it's been a couple hundred years now. We're still doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to reconcile, especially personally, as someone that has an anthropology degree. And, my father's a scientist. On my father's side, a lot of them are engineers, scientists, and just, reconciling how life-saving science can be, right? But at the same time, looking at how it's been used to methodologically, I don't know if that's the right word. Methodically, there we go.
Yeah, I was
English,
is
hard.
I was is it? I don't know.
English is hard.
English is hard
to test and eventually wipe out Black and Indigenous populations. So I think the conversation around this, right, and how it relates to the work that is outlined in the book by Sabrina Strings, to what I reference in the article for Wear Your Voice, to what we're seeing today. I think it's a very interesting conversation to be had. Especially because it impacts so many marginalized people.
That's right. This is this is the magic of Patrilie. When I have conversations with Patrilie, I tend to have that moment where I don't know what to say next.
Just marinate. You just let it marinate.
Just letting it marinate and sweep over me and just all the emotions. Anyway. Yes. So, okay. So I want to come back to this article because I've got
Okay.
it in front of me and that's where we left off on my tangent was talking about how, just a bunch of quote unquote designated random white dudes get together and they decide that it's more advantageous to help people remember numbers by making them round. Who cares what other people like, who's actually affected and what it really means?
Mhm.
So let's go back and talk about this BMI lowering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, you know, that whole incident and the the way that BMI is leveraged, I will say exploited,
Mm-hmm.
to make assumptions and to cut resources and to manipulate, especially communities of color, Black and Indigenous communities.
Yes.
Um, I think just highlights, where we've gone wrong in the food access and food justice movement. I feel
Mm,
like, especially, and some conversations are happening now. I feel like some people are kind of waking up to how this kind of BMI and this concern about obesity has overshadowed what the real important work is. And that is, in a country that produces so much food and has the capital to feed everybody, there is a disproportionate amount of people that still can't put food on their table every day and still can't put food that they, feel nourishes them.
yeah.
And that is the issue. And so, and I feel like that's been spread and accepted by lots of different groups in the food justice and food access community, especially in like in the BIPOC community. I think
Mm,
the internalized fat phobia and the internalized oppression we have in our own communities, that being in a big body is a moral failing.
yeah.
I think some of the worst perpetrators sometimes are among our own. I
Mm,
think it's I think it's the hardest. It's so hard. It's so hard talking about this stuff in communities where people look like me, right?
yeah.
That identify as people of color, because they're the ones most indoctrinated with this fat phobic and internalized hatred of fatness
Yeah.
and what that equates to. So I think that was more like the second part of the article,
Yeah.
the essay that I wrote.
Yeah. Oh, oh my. That's really heavy. That's
Yeah.
really heavy. And
I mean, like, the truth is heavy, and I feel
yeah,
like I would love more spaces to talk about this,
yeah.
to talk about the way that we, the collective we, the people of the global majority,
Mm,
replicate um, white supremacist ideology,
absolutely.
like among our own people.
Oh God. Oh. So that's big. That's big because oh yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm gonna stutter a little bit because this is tender for me. Ooh. Um this is a big idea. This is a really big idea. And I'm like the things that are like my knee-jerk reactions to this are like, well, of course it makes sense that we're so heavily indoctrinated as people of color. And the reason why is because survival.
Right.
We're trying to survive out here in these white supremacist streets. And we are disadvantaged and disenfranchised at every turn. We just don't have a chance. And they bottle our thing. They take things from us, they repackage them, and they sell it to us at a higher price, while penalizing us for having had it in the first place. It's just we're so fucked, and also in spite of all of that, we still stay so strong and we really work toward perseverance. But the fact of the matter is that in the end, we punish ourselves and each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
Um, oh my goodness. Because I do have to say that, like, um, as much as I believe in my work as a fat activist and a body liberationist and a fat liberationist, like, I get nervous sharing about it in a largely Black space that is not already a warm space.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I do not get nervous doing it in a white space
Yeah.
or a majority white space. And I think that for me, part of that is that I don't belong in that white space. So if they don't receive me in the end, it's sort of fine because I knew that I didn't really fit in there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But in the majority Black space, if I get rejected, that threatens my survival in some way.
Right.
I mean, not materially, because I'm not depending on these people to pay my rent or anything like that. But like it does really
Like there's more at stake, I think, emotionally
yeah,
and from a soul perspective.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. That's
yeah.
powerful.
Mm,
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful.
mm.
Yeah.
That's not where I thought I was going to go with this.
No, but I think it's real. I think it's real. And on the flip side, right? Because people of the global majority, because we've been indoctrinated to believe that white supremacy and white supremacist ideology will help us survive
Yeah,
in this white supremacist world, right? There is even more racialization, colorism that occurs, which, we have to be cognizant of our positionality um, in the way that we navigate spaces
that's
in
right.
a way that we might not have to be in exclusively white spaces, because in
That's right.
exclusively white, because I'm a non-Black person of color, and my adjacentness to whiteness is a lot closer than someone that is Black, right? But I think in predominantly white spaces, they just see me as a person of color. They see me as a Latina or whatever, some brown Latina,
Yeah,
and they'll just paint me with a broad brush, right? They'll say you,
absolutely.
this, and this. But there's a lot more in spaces that are BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color. There's to navigate these spaces is completely different and
Yeah.
require a lot more care.
Mm-hmm.
But you add body size on top of that, right? And it becomes even more complicated.
Absolutely.
So I think for me, as someone that isn't Black, when I go into white spaces and I talk about fat liberation and my experiences, as a person of color, you're right, there is less at risk for me, I think, emotionally and mentally than if
Yeah.
there are in spaces that are BIPOC. Because, in spaces that are BIPOC, yes, I speak of my fat experiences, and I even have privilege in this, right? Like I'm a
Yeah.
small to mid fat, like but because of the skin privilege that I have, navigating these spaces becomes a lot messier and a lot more tender, and there's a lot more at stake, not just for me individually, but as a collective.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely lots of layers of complication. I think talking about this stuff, especially in spaces like, for example, I'll just use my family, right? Racially, we're all very like diverse.
Yeah.
And to talk about fat liberation to somebody, let's say in Puerto Rico, where I'm from, that is that is that identifies as like an Afro Boricua, or identifies as Black and living in a fat body, like
Yeah.
in Puerto Rico, societally, you are much more marginalized. Here in the US, I think too, but
Yeah.
you are much more marginalized being dark skinned
Yeah, absolutely.
and being fat than if you are being a blanquita, being
Hmm.
like light skin with the light
Right.
eyes and being in a fat body. And the same thing. I think the level of marginalization you face when you're thin, quote unquote, conventionally attractive,
Yes,
um, regardless of skin color, you are perceived in a different way
absolutely.
on the island than if you lived in a fat body. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of nuance to that for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, that really speaks to just the anti Blackness that has been exported around the world courtesy of colonization.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just exhausting.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
is.
exhausting.
Like the fact that I spend all my waking moments thinking and analyzing and processing this when there are white people, like white people
Hmm.
walking around and this doesn't even cross their head once. Like I'm
Mm.
just like, ugh, I feel robbed of peace.
Talk about that. That's real, right? Because I mean that's where that comes from, right? Like the marginalization and all of the physical and mental effects of that, the emotional weight of all of that. This is where it comes from the fact that
Mm-hmm,
I have to think about it. Like
mm-hmm.
everything that I do, I always have
Right.
to think about it.
Like all
Um,
your steps are informed by that. Mm-hmm.
every single one before I even leave the house. And it's just like, my husband, who is white, he's French, but he's white. Like he's not thinking about this kind of stuff. He's just
Yeah.
like, do I have my wallet and my phone and my keys? Like this is what he's thinking about. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about those things too, but I'm also thinking about, will the chairs fit me? Like, are they gonna talk to me funny because I look like I do? And even though I look like I do, like I also, like you, I have quite a lot of skin privilege,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm biracial, but I am not like definedly black. Like if you look at
Mm-hmm.
me, you'd be, unless you know, like you probably wouldn't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've been told I was Dominican or I've been
Right.
Puerto Rican, like
Right.
all
You're Puerto
kinds of,
Rican, like that
yeah.
racially ambiguous
Yeah,
mix.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I'm racially ambiguous mix. Absolutely. I'm always mixed something. And it tells me more about who I'm talking to than anything. But like knowing that I have that still
Yeah.
makes everything, it somehow even complicates it even more, because I absolutely know how you would treat me if I was a dark skinned person walking into a place. But like, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, uncomfortable place to straddle,
Very
like
much.
personally uncomfortable, right? Because
Very
you
much.
navigate your privilege and power with, ways that you've been marginalized. And it's such a fine line. And at the same time, right, like you need to be very cognizant of how you position yourself
That's
in
right.
spaces of color,
That's
right?
right.
So it's a like it takes up a lot of my brain. It does.
Yes, it
I'm going to be
does.
honest. And it
Yeah,
gets tiring sometimes, but I think that if my goal is collective liberation, like that's what it has to be.
that's right. I mean, it's part of the commitment. It's just like, this is what you have on your plate, and you just do the best you can to carry it
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
best you can.
Right.
Mm, mm. Well, that's not where I thought we were going to go
Yeah.
today, but I'm glad that that's where we went today. Um, so just to like come back to this article just one more time, the thing that like I said, the thing that was really impressive to me was just how human it was. Um, I feel like there's really a fundamental dissonance in our culture, where there's this impetus to always keep moving forward, like just keep moving forward, always be progressing, always be changing, always be, moving, reaching toward.
Oh, I fall into that trap 100%.
Absolutely, absolutely. How could you not, right? But what I really love about this article is that you look back at yourself and you are pretty raw and honest with who you were and what you were thinking and your biases and those
Mhm.
things that you carried with you at that time. And I think that that's, I'm going to use this term, I think that that's amazingly brave, you know, completely, you know, like non-pejoratively, but I think it's really brave. And the reason why is because looking back at who we used to be, especially considering the fact that most of the time, great majority of the time, the person we used to be is somebody sort of not really pleasant in relation to where we are today.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, there's definitely a lot of like, I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to pretend she didn't exist. I'm going to pretend that didn't actually happen. I wasn't there. And I love when someone actually can look at their past self and have a conversation with them and like be honest with that. And like then also like show the little breadcrumb trail of how you got to where you are today. Because like, I mean, this is the thing that I wrote down, which is how do you know or how do you grow if you don't know where you are rooted?
Mm.
Yeah.
That is so, I resonate with that on so many different levels of where I am right now currently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very interesting that you say that because connecting to my career trajectory and my academic background, I've wanted to be an anthropologist since I was 5 or 6 years old, since
Oh
I
my
first learned what
gosh.
it was,
Yeah.
because what I understood about it at the time was it was a glimpse into who we were
Mm.
that leads to who we are now.
Mm.
And when I was in 7th grade, my teacher told me, you can't be an anthropologist. That's not a real job. After I spent like a months on my anthropology science project.
No.
Yeah, but it's all right because it took a mental health diagnosis, 3 attempts to go back to college at 3 or 4 different schools to say, you know what, I'm going to go back to my roots
Yeah.
and do what I wanted to do, which is
Yeah.
to study um, scholarship, to get scholarship around anthropology.
Yeah.
And so just that, what you wrote down, I think really reflects my worldview because if the roots are strong, right, like that's where you flourish. And I've
Yes.
never been somebody who has run away from who I am. Sometimes do I feel a lot of shame around it sometimes, unnecessary shame? Yes.
Yeah.
And that's something I struggle with a lot. But
Yeah.
hiding who you were denies de- denies community, denies the world from your wholeness, right?
Mm.
And I think when you just present yourself in one way, that's just a fragment of who you
Yeah.
are. And is that how you want to live through life? And it connects. So I have a tattoo on my right arm of the 7 moon phases of
Mm.
the 7 phases of the moon. And I resonate a lot with the moon because, there's this phrase that says, no matter what phase you're in, you're always whole.
Yes.
Right. And that is how I walk through life. So I think it's always really important for people to see the wholeness of you, um, to really know what it's like to live life as a human. Because
Mm.
that's what I am, because that's what we are.
That's absolutely right. Oh, I love it. I love it. Ooh, so good. So
Yeah, it's
good.
something I think a lot about on a daily basis. So I had that ready to go.
Be prepared. Absolutely with the mic drop. I love it. I love it. But I mean, just like this conversation about being rooted, I'm amazed that like this phrase that just like came from my reflection after reading your article was one that resonated so hard with you because it reminds me again of our first conversation, the first interview that we did with for Braving Body Shame, where, like um like I am struggling myself. Like it's something that I want to get back to, really like learning more and digging into my own indigeneity and my ancestry, and like being in closer relationship with these things. Um, and the thing that's holding me back from doing it is grief. Like just this deep grief of like being disconnected and not knowing and not being in better relationship. And there was some sharing that we did on that, and it's so good to know that I'm not alone. It's sad to know that I'm not alone somehow too.
Because it's sad because you wonder why so many people struggle
Right.
with this around grief. Yeah, grief. So, it's been a few months since we connected through that Braving Body Shame conference. And I know that, I told you about all these plans because very much I was in a similar place about truly what it means to truly reconnect with the wholeness of my ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
And, because I'm mixed as Laik, as they say, that includes white colonizer and settler ancestry. And how do I leverage that in a way that moves towards collective liberation while still honoring and never dismissing my African, my West African, and my Indigenous ancestry. And so that's been my journey, I think, since the last time we talked. And I even spent a significant amount of time in Puerto Rico and doing a lot of reflection around what it means to, have your ancestors and your ancestry as part of your human practice, right? Spiritual practice, human practice as a human. While still recognizing, right, the wholeness of it, and how to move forward, right? If that includes who to be in solidarity with, who to, consider reparations, some sort of restorative process around the ancestors that have contributed to colonialism and to colonization.
Right.
So and it is a grieving process. It is a process of letting go, but also a process of honor, paying homage and paying honor, and letting go of a lot of things. So like it's never too late, Diana, like to reconnect with that. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s, and for a long time I thought my ancestry was one thing, and then it kind of opens up in your face and you learn things about you and your family and the trauma that's been passed down. But the timing of that was a gift. Even if it was later in life, it's still a gift, because I'm at a point where I can actively choose. I can actually choose what to do with it.
That's right. That's right. And that's where we should all be, right? We should all be able to actively choose what we do with whatever it is. I love that. I love that. So, Patrilie, I got one final question for you.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Good. So, how are you living your best fat life?
How am I living my best fat life? I am living it with lots of self-compassion. And I'm living it with, the realization that, unfortunately, while I want to live my best fat life, the world is not necessarily equipped yet to handle all of that. But But I think it's important to cherish and really hold on to the moments that the world does affirm you.
Mm.
So, for me, it looks like, because, food and body shame run deep, deep, deep in my family. Like,
Yeah.
my eating disorder um, is not a personal disorder, it's a family disorder, right? Just
That's right.
because it was so ingrained. But I feel so affirmed by being embraced by the matriarchs in my family who are proud of the work that I'm doing,
Mm.
and say that they they wish things were different
Yeah.
for them, right?
Yeah.
But they hold hope for the future.
Mm.
And that really affirms me, because the matriarchs in my family, my grandmothers, my tias, my femme and women cousins and family members, knowing that the work that I'm doing to heal around our family trauma and our generational trauma, and doing this ancestral healing, is reaching them, like,
Mm.
it makes this all worth it. So knowing that helps me live my best big fat life, my big best fat life. What does it go?
Your best fat life. I love
my
it. Yeah.
my bestest, biggest, fattest life.
I love it. I love it. Oh, um, delicious. It's so delicious. I love it. God, Patrilie, thank you so much for coming and
Yay.
speaking with me today and having this deep ass conversation and just going
Always,
there. I love
always,
it.
always. Thank you for curating the space that allows me to be vulnerable and, shares the vulnerability.
Mm.
I know there aren't too many spaces out there for folks like us. So the fact that we can hold this space and curate the space and share the space together means a lot.
Mm. I love it. Oh, well, thanks for being here. You have the best day.
Thank you.
Well, hey y'all, it's me again, and I hope you really enjoyed that conversation because I know I did. Patrilie is brilliant and just so much fun to talk to. So, for all of you who were really appreciative of what Patrilie has to say and what they're about, then go ahead and hit her up. She's got a website over at www.embodylib, so EMBODYLIB.com. You can find them on Instagram at the_bodylib_advocate, and you can always hire Patrilie for one-on-one and institutional consulting services for those who are interested in applying body liberation frameworks into their healthcare, wellness, and educational practices. You know you need it. Go holla at Patrilie and get yourself leveled up. So thanks again for being here with us today, and I hope you had a good time. I'll talk to you later. Bye.